TNT Sports has acquired the exclusive U.S. English language broadcast rights to the world-class FIBA men's and women's tournaments in a multi-year deal. And this is coming after the fact that so many fans were asking, where can we watch these games? Where can we watch these games? Because this will be the first time that we get to see Caitlin Clark suit up in her senior jersey for Team USA.
Someone just made the connection between TNT, Caitlin Clark, and a PR campaign that competitors claim is wholly biased in her favor. Everything was explained by an expert, and the responses on the internet were precisely what you would anticipate. It was noisy, disorganized, and crowded with individuals who obviously did not want to hear it. Everything fits together a bit too well, including the timing, the agreements, and the numbers. Do you believe that TNT is actually making an investment in women's basketball? Or is this all just a marketing ploy by Caitlin Clark dressed in a sports jersey? Let us know in the comments.
You're talking about, I do just kind of think that it's ironic that both TNT Sports it was hosting Unrivaled and now will be hosting these FIBA games, because you better believe, you guys, people are going to be comparing the ratings. They're going to be comparing the ratings whether you like it or not, and we will just see what the viewership is like for these Team USA games. Now you can see from the schedule here, they play on March 11th, March 12th, March 14th, 15th, and the 17th. Now I am planning on going live for all of these games.
Let's begin with the update that quietly ignited a storm across the internet. TNT Sports has officially secured the exclusive U.S. English language broadcast rights for the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying tournament. The multi-year agreement is finalized and confirmed. What makes the timing particularly notable is that the tournament, scheduled to take place in San Juan, Puerto Rico from March 11th through March 17th, will mark the first opportunity for fans to watch Caitlin Clark suit up for the senior Team USA squad on live television. Pure coincidence, right? For weeks, fans have been asking where they would actually be able to watch these games. Nobody wants to reach tip-off only to discover that the only option is some complicated streaming service that requires multiple passwords and a miracle just to log in. TNT stepping in to secure the rights certainly sounds like positive news on the surface, and in several ways it absolutely is. The games will now be widely accessible. The broadcasts will come with legitimate production value. Fans will actually have a straightforward way to tune in. But this is where the situation becomes a bit more interesting. TNT also happens to hold the television rights to Unrivaled, the off-season women's basketball league that recently completed its second season. And the ratings for Unrivaled this year were, to say it politely, not exactly what anyone had been hoping for. Viewership numbers came in weaker than expected. The one aspect of Unrivaled that truly generated energy was its traveling city tour format, where the league took games on the road and brought them to different markets. That approach created buzz. The television ratings, however, told a very different story.
Gave them any leverage in negotiations, because you can see from the viewership, like, Unrivaled can't compete with the WNBA and everything that the WNBA has built over 29 years. And I know Nafisa Collier kept saying, like, we're running a sustainable business. Unrivaled has only been around for 2 seasons. And while I do think that it was awesome that her and Brianna Stewart were able to put together this league and get a lot of investors and get a lot of sponsors, and all of that is admirable, and I applaud them for that, they used that really heavy-handedly in these negotiations, and I do feel like it has always been a conflict of interest. And it definitely turned from something that started as an off-season league where players didn't have to go overseas to a way to actively put down the WNBA.
So now the situation looks like this. TNT holds the broadcast rights to Unrivaled, a league that struggled to generate strong television momentum, while at the same time securing the rights to the FIBA qualifying tournament that features Caitlin Clark wearing a Team USA jersey at the senior level for the very first time. And people across the basketball world are not blind to how that combination appears. Rival voices are openly frustrated. Critics are claiming that a media infrastructure is being built around a single player. Analysts are connecting the dots between TNT's growing portfolio and what they believe could be a calculated plan to position Caitlin Clark as the central figure of their women's basketball coverage. Whether someone views that as a grand conspiracy or simply smart business strategy depends entirely on their perspective. But the online reactions have been intense. On one side, supporters are celebrating the increased exposure and attention. On the other side, Critics argue that the entire situation feels like manufactured hype meant to elevate one athlete above the rest of the sport. Meanwhile, a large group of everyday fans sits somewhere in the middle, mostly focused on the simple fact that they just want to watch basketball and are quietly relieved that these games will actually be available on television. Now here is the element that adds even more drama to the entire story. The FIBA qualifying tournament begins on March 11th. The deadline for reaching a new WNBA collective bargaining agreement to prevent a stalled season is March 10th, just one day earlier. In other words, one day before fans are supposed to celebrate Caitlin Clark's debut with Team USA, the entire WNBA season could potentially be hanging in uncertainty. The timing alone almost feels unbelievable. Either the league finalizes a deal and the positive momentum flows straight into the tournament, or negotiations fall apart and the tournament suddenly becomes the only women's basketball fans have to watch for a period of time. And TNT will be broadcasting every moment of it. Critics who believe this situation is strategically planned are pointing directly at that timeline and raising plenty of questions. If the WNBA season ends up being delayed or stalled, the FIBA qualifying games instantly become the only live women's basketball on television. The biggest star participating in those games just happens to be Caitlin Clark, and the network carrying the broadcast just happens to be TNT. You really could not script something like this any better, except it almost feels like someone already did. Let's pause for a moment and talk about Unrivaled, because understanding TNT's position becomes difficult without looking at it closely. When Unrivaled first launched, the concept sounded both simple and appealing. The goal was to create a domestic off-season league so that top WNBA players would no longer need to travel overseas during the winter months to continue playing. The idea was to provide them with an option inside the United States. Keep players healthier, keep them closer to home, and offer them additional income opportunities. On paper, it was a strong concept and one that made a lot of practical sense. What happened afterward, however, complicated things significantly. Unrivaled quickly turned into a piece of leverage within the larger collective bargaining negotiations. Players and even some of the league's co-founders began referencing it as a negotiating tool, essentially suggesting that if the WNBA did not significantly improve compensation, athletes could simply choose to play in Unrivaled instead. The narrative gradually shifted from, "We built this league to support players," toward, "We may not actually need the WNBA." That shift in tone created a very different discussion. Many fans, including people who originally supported the idea of Unrivaled, started to feel uneasy about the direction the conversation was taking and where the league's role in the larger ecosystem might ultimately lead.
Talked about this a couple months ago. If we look at the salaries that the players are going to make in the WNBA this season, if they agree to the deal that is on the table, they will actually be making more than NBA players did during their 30th season. If you equate for inflation and all of those types of things, that means that they're actually ahead of where the NBA was at in their 30th season. And so,
because here is the reality check that many people involved in those discussions seemed unwilling to acknowledge openly. Unrivaled simply is not in a position to compete with the WNBA. The television ratings make that point very clear. The WNBA has spent nearly 3 decades building its structure and reputation. That is 29 years of developing infrastructure, marketing the league, growing loyal fan bases, securing sponsorships, signing television agreements, and creating a long competitive history. By comparison, Unrivaled has existed for only 2 seasons. Just 2. Trying to use a league with a 2-season history to pressure a 29-year institution into completely reshaping its entire financial model is not real negotiating leverage. It is more like optimism backed by extremely aggressive public relations. And to complicate matters further, several players who were injured while playing in Unrivaled this season will now be unavailable for the FIBA qualifying tournament. Aaliyah Boston and Sonia Citron are both out, meaning neither of them will be suiting up in San Juan. Aaliyah Boston's situation is particularly frustrating because very few details are being shared publicly. She is dealing with a lower leg injury while with the Indiana Fever, and that is essentially all that is known at this point. It does not appear to involve surgery or crutches, but as anyone who followed Caitlin Clark last season can attest, soft tissue injuries can sideline a player for significant stretches even when they don't look severe externally. the body doesn't always signal the full severity of an injury. So here we are, Aaliyah Boston, who could be in line for a max contract this season, is now missing Team USA qualifiers due to an injury sustained in an off-season league. From an ownership perspective, if you are preparing to offer a max or supermax contract worth millions, this situation is being scrutinized very closely. The broader question, whether franchise players should be allowed or financially encouraged to participate in off-season leagues, is far from settled. In fact, it's only about to become a much louder debate. During the original CBA negotiations, the WNBA initially pushed for exclusivity clauses that would have restricted or even prevented players from participating in off-season leagues. That proposal, however, was quickly dropped. As a result, under whatever new CBA is ultimately ratified, players will almost certainly retain the freedom to play in unrivaled, overseas, or any other league of their choosing. That said, freedom of choice does not mean there won't be consequences embedded in individual contracts. Team owners have financial resources, legal teams, and long memories, particularly when a max contract player arrives at training camp dealing with an injury from a league the team never requested her to play in. Circling back to TNT and the larger context, the expert commentary that sparked outrage among rivals wasn't really focused on. The point of the analysis wasn't that TNT is acting in a sneaky or underhanded way. It was about recognizing a clear pattern. TNT holds the WNBA broadcast rights. TNT owns Unrivaled. TNT now controls the FIBA qualifying tournament. And the player whose name surfaces in every single one of those conversations is Caitlin Clark. She hasn't played in Unrivaled, but the WNBA rights, the FIBA rights, and the growing audience that has followed her since her debut all converge under TNT's umbrella. That alignment is not some coincidence anyone can casually dismiss. The rivals raising concerns aren't just casual commentators. These are people who genuinely believe that the sport features multiple elite stars, which it absolutely does, and they see the constant channeling of media attention toward a single player as something that diminishes coverage and recognition for everyone else at the top level.